Well, good morning, Columbia United Church of Christ. It is April 7th, 2020. Today is Tuesday of Holy Week. We celebrated Palm Sunday in this sanctuary this past week, and we will be celebrating Maundy Thursday and Good Friday via Zoom the next later on this week. And I will send out a Zoom link to all of you to join in those worship services. And Sunday morning, we will live stream our Easter worship from this same sanctuary at 10:30, and that will be on our Facebook page, and it will be on our website. So the website has a better connection. You'll want to go through there. Today, however, we are talking about Exodus chapter 19. So I'm going to share this with you as we continue our journey with the Israelites, and this is where they reach Mount Sinai finally. It says, "On the third new moon after the Israelites had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They had journeyed from Rephidim, entered the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. Israel camped there in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, 'Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the Israelites, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the people. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the Israelites.' So Moses came, summoned the elders of the people, and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. The people all answered as one, 'Everything that the Lord has spoken we will do.' Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'I am going to come to you in a dense cloud in order that the people may hear what I speak with you, and so trust you ever after.' When Moses had heard the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, 'Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and prepare for the third day, because on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set limits for the people all around, saying, be careful not to go up to the mountain or touch the edge of it. Any who touch the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch them, but they shall be stoned or shot with arrows. Whether animal or human being, they shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they may then go up on the mountain.' So Moses went down from the mountain to the people, and he consecrated the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, 'Prepare for the third day. Do not go near a woman.' On the morning of the third day there was thunder and lightning, as well as a thick cloud on the mountain, and a blast of a trumpet so loud that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. The smoke that went up like the smoke of a kiln, while the whole mountain shook violently. As the blast of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses would speak, and God would answer him in thunder. When the Lord descended upon Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, the Lord summoned Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Go down and warn the people not to break through to the Lord to look, otherwise many of them will perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them.' Moses said to the Lord, 'The people are not permitted to come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and keep it holy.' The Lord said to him, 'Go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you, but do not let either the priests or the people break through to come up to the Lord, otherwise he will break out against them.' So Moses went down to the people and told them." So Exodus 19, this chapter of the book of Exodus represents a shift in the narrative. For the first 18 chapters of Exodus, we see people of Israel evolving into God's people. learning more about God through experience and through the instructional campaigns of Moses and Aaron. We see the wilderness journey that they go on as sort of an evolution as well, learning and growing through hunger and thirst and hunger for God, and physical hunger and thirst. They hunger and thirst for God, and God satisfies them both physically and spiritually. The first 18 chapters of Exodus are the beginning stages of development in the relationship between the people of Israel and God. But starting with chapter 19 now, that relationship is developed into a covenant. That there is developed in the next 21 chapters of Exodus, and we're not going to read them all on these Chancel Chats, a relationship contract that will detail how Israel is to be God's people and how God will be the people of Israel. Their relationship as God's people, their election, if you will, is codified in these 21 chapters. But first, they reach Mount Sinai today. This is where they find God most closely present with them. In Hebrew literature, mountaintop experiences are common ways to experience God. Mountains in Hebrew literature are close to God as they reach high into the heavens. By climbing a mountain, you get closer to God, and throughout Hebrew literature, we find people meeting God on mountains. Mount Sinai is the place where the Hebrews communed most closely with God. But let me tell you about a Mount Sinai place in my life. For me, that place is Camp Movell, our Missouri Mid-South Conference camp in Union, Missouri. Quite the opposite of Mount Sinai, Movell is more of a basin. The lake at Movell is a low place where the waters gather, run off from higher elevations around it. As one person in my life used to state, Movell is a bowl. But despite its lack of elevation, Movell is a thin space in our world, a place where God's reality and our reality are very close to meshing together. I have been involved with Camp Movell since I was in grade school, as a camper, as a counselor, as the parent of a camper, as a director, and as a board member. In my many weeks of retreat at Camp Movell, I have felt God's presence many times, guiding me, comforting me, giving me clarity, providing me with strength. There have been times in my life when I have struggled with personal issues or spiritual questions, and God has spoken to me at Camp Movell. There have been times when I have been trying to discern a direction in my life, and God has provided me with that direction while I was at Camp Movell. The presence of God is very real in this sacred space. Do you have a sacred space in your life? Is there a place where you have experienced God's real presence speaking to you and guiding you? Is there a Mount Sinai, a Camp Movell, that you return to time and time again to connect with the eternal presence of God? In times such as this, you may not be able to physically return to that place. Maybe that place no longer exists, but you can return in your thoughts and your meditations. Spend some time thinking about your spiritual Mount Sinai and the comfort it brings to you. There's an important aspect of this narrative that needs to be lifted up today. Starting with verse 10, the narrative discusses in detail the people of Israel consecrating themselves to God. There are details about how their people are going to be consecrated and how they will be consecrated in order to meet God on the mountain. What does it mean to be consecrated? Well, in this narrative, to consecrate themselves, the people of Israel wash their clothes and wash their houses, they avoid contact with one another, and they set limitations on their daily travel. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like the limitations and hygienic considerations we have placed on one another in this time of coronavirus? Could it be that we are consecrating ourselves for something more? Consecration, by definition, means the act of making or declaring something sacred. When something is sacred, it is connected to God. It is dedicated to God. It is reflective of God's presence. We think of sacred things in our lives. The church is a sacred place, the Bible, and maybe even Camp Moval. These places, these things are not God, but they are reflective of God. They are connected to God. They are dedicated to God. And through these objects, we see God clearly. Sacred means dedicated to God. And these Hebrew people, by consecrating themselves, are dedicating themselves to God. The word sacrament comes from the same root word as sacred. We have two sacraments in the Protestant church, baptism and communion. These are called sacraments because through them we see God most clearly. They are sacred moments. Through them we dedicate ourselves, our children, and our lives to God. A sacrament is the time Jesus is most clearly seen in our liturgical ecclesial lives together. Consecrated people who are clearly seen as dedicated to God. The Hebrew people consecrated themselves through ritual cleaning and conduct in their time of wilderness journey. Are we consecrating ourselves to God in this time of wilderness journey? Are we at Mount Sinai yet? What will you do in a time such as this to consecrate yourself to God? Cleanliness, isolation protocols, these are all necessary tools for combating this plague at hand, but they can also be opportunities for consecration. Isolate yourself in this time, not from the coronavirus, but for God. Let us pray. Creator God, as we come to you in this time of confusion and chaos and the time when everything is changed and out of our control, we consecrate ourselves to you. Help us use this time to consecrate ourselves through this period of isolation, through this gift of time that we have been given. Let us use this time to even more closely align ourselves with your will. Help us, dear God, to be consecrated servants, serving you and serving each other. We thank you, God, for this time that we might consecrate ourselves, and we look forward to the day when we can emerge from our isolation into your world, dedicated servants. Amen. Well, blessings to you all. Don't forget we have our book study coming up at noon, and we have Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday services at 7 o'clock via Zoom on Thursday and Friday, most naturally. And we'll be back the next few mornings with Chancel Chats at 10:30. Blessings to you all. We'll see you later.